Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? So I'm happy to see you here, and we are here with our very next session, episode 2 of How I Did It series. And we're going to talk about how to build rapport to stand out as a tie-breaking product manager candidate. Very long, very mouthful, but then again, this is what we are doing. And today we have a wonderful speaker with us joining today. I'm so glad that they are here. So first of all, let me go through today's agenda. As usual, we're gonna be opening, which is now. I'm gonna be introducing myself. Then we're gonna dig into standout with resumes. We're gonna also discuss about how to be a tiebreaker candidate, more into diving into interview questions and how to tackle behavioral answers and questions like that. And then we can also move on to the question answer and finally closing. But rest assured, you can leave your questions at the chat, and it's possible that I might pick your questions in the middle of our session, and we'll try to answer that. So without further ado, let's move on. So hello again, I'm Sarah Purgan. I'm a technical product manager at TELUS. I'm also a mother. I hold a computer engineering degree and also a master of innovation and entrepreneurship. I am an avid supporter of women financial stability, and that's what I'm trying to do with NeedSpot as well, in addition to NeedSpot webinars, which is to make sure you make informed decision about your next career choice. So next, I want to introduce our speaker, Sayed Kimlani. He's also known as Ali, and he's a product manager at Amazon Prime Video. So I'm not gonna introduce him. I will let him introduce himself. So Ali, please take it away from here.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Good to be part of this conversation. The introductions have to be customized according to audience. And as far as I understand, NeedSpot's audience is job seekers, people who are looking to pivot within their careers. So from that perspective, I have worked in multiple types of jobs, started my career as an engineer, moved over to hybrid roles between engineering and product management, and then ultimately with product management. I worked with startups, with enterprise sector, and also in some privately held unicorn companies as well. So it's been a journey, and it'll be great to share a bit of perspective that I've learned through this journey. I can't hear you, Sarah. I think you're on mute.
It's going to happen in my session too. The most favorite line, sorry, I was mute. Anyways, so I was gonna ask you about your experience more in details. You have worked in 3 different countries and many different companies itself, and you have worked in startups, you have worked in enterprise, and you also are working at FAANG companies. And a lot of us are here to know how you basically did it, right? What took you to go through from where you started and where you are right now?
I think with a lot of people, the initial decision to move into software primarily was that I was exposed to coding at a really early age, learned to code in my teenagers, and then I was like, okay, great. Video games was the first love, and they're like, okay, I'm going to code and I'm going to learn how to build software and video games. And then ultimately you take inspiration from figures like Bill Gates and personalities like those. So chose computer science, did coding, and opted to go for a startup because, in my understanding, that's where all the action was. And I worked in startups, about 4 startups over the course of about 6 years. So first couple of them crashed and burned magnificently. The third one was partially successful. But I think for me, the life-changing fact was that when I joined a startup in Pakistan, it was called Pring. It was mobile social network for areas which did not have great connectivity. I was privileged to work with a great founder who was our CTO, and the team he had built together. That really helped me take my career to the next step. During my time at Pring, I worked with Nash. He's co-founder. He's the founder of Integri.io. He's in California right now, but I'll always be indebted to him. He introduced me to product management, and that role was a bit hybrid between technical and product. I learned my way, introduced those concepts in the company. By that time, what I wanted to do was to learn how the technology business is done. So I wanted to understand how the business decisions are taken within this business. And that's when Nash advised me to start looking into product management, because that will get me a bit closer to what I wanted to learn. Startup got acquired. I updated my resume on LinkedIn, and all I wanted to do at that point was to go and work for established enterprises to see how successful companies do it. From a product perspective, from building the products from 0 to 1, as they say.
And
I
so, sorry. So you're saying that when you were applying for enterprise, you already transitioned to product management role, or were you just, taking those responsibilities?
I had already transitioned to product management role, and so my role at Pring was something which afforded me to transition from engineering to product. But it was self-learning. I didn't had any formal training. Once I joined Rakuten in Japan, that's where I got formal training. I had the opportunity to work with product leaders, professional product leaders, and see how good product management is done firsthand.
Okay. So, it's different. You have been through this journey where not only you transitioned within the company, but you also traveled different, countries and went through the recruitment process itself multiple times. So you're aware of how different the recruitment process is at startups, at enterprises, and now like different companies, large tech companies. So do you want to? What are your thoughts about that? Do you want to tell us like how you find those interview processes different from each other?
Um, so I think with the startup, it depends a lot on the founders and co-founders and what they're looking for. Usually it's more candid. Ambiguity around the product and the market is quite a bit there. With enterprises, I think it's more about learning what the company's culture is, what their values are, and how they and what in which market they are operating. So, for example, with Rakuten, they are very big on Kaizen, the Japanese concept of continuous improvement. So when I read about Rakuten pre-interviews, I was preparing for it. I was like, okay, they're very big on Kaizen. So I had to dig a bit deeper on my experience and figure out, hey, was there any example that I can quote within the interview about where I improved myself continuously, and and the product and the value that I added. Similarly, for Amazon, it's quite a bit about their bar raiser culture or their leadership principles. So study them and figure out if you have some examples in your career that you can actually link to them. So that really helped. Interviewing with startups is mostly about people and the founding teams primarily. So if you can see who the founders are, where they're coming from, LinkedIn is a great resource. Anything else, if they've given a talk, try to understand their mindset and see two things. One is, whether you are aligned with their vision, the way they think. And if that is a yes, then maybe the next step is there something in your experience that you can actually align with what they are about, and demonstrate to them that there is some common values that you share and there's certain common goals that you can achieve. So that's been my journey so far.
You
It
had
answers.
I don't know how many times I have said that already. I had a chance to work with you as well, and I remember like asking questions. I basically had chance to work with Ali in Japan and as a colleague. And after so many years, we're sitting here together. Never anticipated this, but yes, it's very great, and that's one of the reason I brought you here because there are a lot of people looking into going, entering or into the industry as a product manager. Sometimes they are product manager, but they're maybe working for startup and want to enter into, for example, FANG companies. So I think there is a lot of things that there are many factors that plays in. Sometimes when we are applying, we just get rejected right away, and there is no way to find get that feedback because it's not rejected by a human. It's just rejected by a system or an ATS system, and it's so difficult and frustrating for us to know what went wrong because building that resume is the first step, right? And what went wrong with my resume? So I think if you like to touch on that part as well, we will be very happy. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I think resume is an ever evolving journey in itself. So the way you build your resume now versus how you built your resume a few years ago would be very different, I believe. Um, with me, what I've learned is that usually I would, create my resume based on, hey, what my responsibilities were, details of the roles, so on and so forth. But when I started hiring people, I was afforded the opportunity to hire people. I noticed that I'm more interested in what they have achieved, what they have contributed, rather than what their role is. So if you tell me I'm an SDE at a company XYZ, I have a bit of an idea what the role of a software development engineer is, but what did you contribute to it? That led me to convert my resume to be an achievement-based resume. So, all right, this is my title, this is the company I work for, this is the time I worked for them, and this is what I achieved. So, for example, going back to the time at Pring, we did a lot of things, but one of the key metrics that we drove was monthly active users. And for a social networking to go at before, more than 50% is a big deal, I suppose. So we took the monthly active users from 11% to 50%. And that's what became the top line of my resume whenever I write about that role. Similarly, for my time at Rakuten, I helped as a product leader, I helped launch a few initiatives. So I write about them. Hey, I launched X product in this market, and this is what I achieved. So converting your resume from roles and responsibility towards achievement based, for me personally, I think it helped open a lot of doors.
Okay. So you're saying that because you had that experience as product manager, and I was listening to how you were telling about the achievements, what we, from the sales perspective as well, how we are, having those achievements or having those impacts on the company level itself. But this is how product managers are doing because there are connected with many different sometimes departments and stakeholders, so they are seeing the bigger picture. But from the perspective of individual contributor itself, sometimes we don't know about the impact, or maybe we know, but our mind doesn't go there. So what we are doing is we're just, because we have been completing our task, we're just pitching there in our resume, right? We worked on these tools, or we worked on this and that, and I created this and I created that. So if how would you tell us, give us an example, a certain individual contributors doing something, how they can basically find out about what was the bigger impact. For example, if somebody doesn't know how to write it on their resume, so do you have something on that?
So let me go to an example rather than talking in abstract terms. At Rakuten, I had the opportunity to learn about story mapping. that was a pretty much a new technique, and Jeff Patton was all about promoting it. And I think he came to the head office, and it was a 2-day training session that I did. And with a lot of other product managers, we learned about it. And I implemented that within my team. And that helped us go through brainstorming and initial phases of product discovery quite a bit. Now, I can see that those sessions that where we did all of this discovery really helped us build better products down the line. So that's, as an individual contributor, this is something that I can write. So I can write it in a way that I train myself on story mapping and introduce the concept of story mapping within the organization that help transform product discovery the way my company does product discovery. That's a contribution that you have made right then and there. So there are a lot of things when you are working on that you are introducing to the company. Those are the achievements you can readily make part of your resume. If you have delivered something and it had some positive results, obviously numbers help a lot. But if you don't have it readily at your disposal, or you are just starting out and you don't have a lot of experience to write down in your resume, there are things that you can write down that you brought to the table. And that can help you make a achievements-based resume or get you started on that journey.
So thank you so much for, first of all, answering this question, because I had this struggle when I was transitioning, right? I realized my resume had was very technical, right? When I saw this, because I was seeing from the perspective, oh, I have so much, experience, and I'm bringing so much to the plate from my technical knowledge and all those things. But it's very different how for very different roles, right? It's not only about writing down your resumes of what you have worked on. It's kind of like a job itself, right? Where you are tailoring your resume, and it's also require you to speak that kind of language, use that kind of language that a product manager would use, to share the achievement of even products. So you yourself are the product itself. So you are basically explaining it to others. So I would say, we were talking earlier about this, that first of all, the first step is, your application is basically submitting your resume. So now there are two ways to submit your resumes, two major ways. It's like you're giving it to you're approached by a recruiter, right? And you're giving it to a human, and then you're applying, and it's going through an ATS system. By the way, ATS is applicant tracking system. So are there any tricks and tips involved? So I would love to know. I know humans, they cannot just reach large quantity of text, and it gets really boring very quickly. But ATS system, it doesn't matter. So I would love to know the tricks. I would actually go to next step. Yes, if it's about master resume.
So again, different cultures, different organization, different people have different requirements. If you go online and try to search a perfect template for resume, you'll be surprised, like it's so much varied. And this is something that I encountered as well. And again, speaking from personal experience, when I moved from Pakistan to Japan, the way the resumes are built and read in Japan is very different. Over there, it's like one experience or one job is one page. So let's say you have worked in 3 jobs before applying to a job in a Japanese company, they would want to know it in detail. They want to prepare themselves before the interview, and they would want to know that. So at that point, the help from recruiter really came in. So my recruiter, he worked with me to create the resume in the way it is expected for that job market, which was pretty much alien to me. And we had quite a few drafts and communication on it. We spent a couple of days creating that resume. I wasn't very happy with it, but he was like, no, these are the few things that you need, and this is how you do it. Then on when I was, it was, I think, 5-page resume which was like, oh God, who's going to read 5 page? But that's how that market works. But there was one advantage to it. And I realized early on, your initial audience for your resume is the ATS system, as you said, or the recruiters, or the HR um, members who are going to screen you or screen your resume. So you're essentially building your resume for it. So if you are a product, it's a marketing document, your resume, and the first audience that it needs to get through is these. And once it gets through to them, only then it goes to product managers and hiring managers and your teammates. So building large resume helped me get through their ATS system. It helped me get through their screening system. You were earlier saying about the temptation to write everything, all the tools and technologies, and then you have to write your achievements. Yeah, you unfortunately that's the reality. As far as I understand, uh, LinkedIn has this feature which says how closely do you match to the job description, and it's basically doing pattern matching and what you have written in your resume and what they have, the keywords that they have. So it might not be a very popular thing to say, but the length of resume actually, if it's larger, you have more terms and you can write more about this. This might be able to get you through ATS pretty efficiently. But on the larger question, I would always prefer to get my resume through either a recruiter or an internal reference within the company, their own internal employee referral system. Uh, Applying directly, obviously, it's the most convenient way to do so. But if you work with a recruiter, they will figure out how relevant you are to the opportunity. They will give you more clarity about the role, and you can also figure out, okay, if you want to go for it or not. And their process is such that they put your resume in front of a hiring manager. So work with recruiters, trust their judgment. Obviously, they don't know everything. You can guide them a bit. Internal reference also works because it can also get you or fast track your resume in front of hiring managers. The last is obviously applying to their application system and waiting for the outcome. And yeah.
I was gonna say, I actually smiled when you were telling me about the tricks. Somebody also tell me like, oh, you know what? Because they say that, oh, I have to limit my resume to maximum 2 pages, but I wanted to say a lot of things. I know there are certain people also top it up with the cover letters as well, but for resume itself to be, recognized by ATS, they used uh, some text, hidden text actually, which is not part of the resume, but it was somewhere here and there on the corner with white ink, or you can say, yeah, white color. So it's basically not readable by human eye, but these are the keywords that they accumulated and put it everywhere. So obviously the ATS system is reading the text, and so it's matching the keywords even if it's not it's not part of your responsibilities, but it just gets shortlisted. So there are a lot of things that are going on just to get recognized by AT system. And this is one of the reasons when you don't have a proper keywords, you get a rejection even before you get
Yeah.
to know who rejected you. So that's ATS, that's what's going on.
But
And yeah,
what I would say is take what I said with a pinch of salt. Of course, your resume needs to be shortlisted, but then somebody is going to review it, and then ultimately you can't make it in a way that is completely made for the bots, for example, or getting through ADS. So you have to strike a fine balance. I mean, don't create a 12-page resume because I said earlier that it gets you through it. The length of resume, you can have more words and things like that, but you have to strike a balance somewhere. Ultimately, somebody's going to read it, and it should make sense to them. So you have a story to tell, how you work. I experimented once with a line at the end of each experience job. I would say why I left that job or why my commitment with this company ended. So, for example, I worked at Pring and then I moved to Japan to work with Enterprise. So that would actually give the interviewer some idea of what's happening here. And then I was working with Rakuten in Japan and moved to Rakuten in England. And I said their flagship product was sponsoring FC Barcelona, and there was opportunity to work in that product team. So I volunteered for it, got selected, and moved to UK. So these are the things which really helped me get through it. So I experimented it with once, and I was surprised that my interview, in which interview was looking at this resume, most of the questions came from that particular line. All right, so FC Barcelona football club, yeah, great. So what was so big about it that you were like, okay, no, I need to go and get it? Okay, and then the conversation was there. So I was in a way driving the conversation based on this small little experiment that I did. I think that was very interesting as well.
Yeah, I think it's more important to have more of a two-way conversation than interrogation itself. And that's why I put some steps over here. So I'm just gonna read through it a little bit for our audience. So I think there are four major steps into your like moving towards your getting your dream job. So first of all, always make a master resume. Put everything. Nobody is judging you. However you put, just put every single thing that you know and you have done in a particular company. And then you have that job description, right? You want to apply something. Now I have heard there are a lot of people advise about apply every single day to a new job or apply to hundreds and 200 jobs. So it's basically the question leads to quality over quantity. I myself at this point realize that hey, it's not really working for me. It doesn't in the long run work. Maybe you will, because you are applying for 100 jobs, you might heard back, right? But then I think I want to ask you, Leon, that have you been through this process where you have applied to multiple jobs versus very tailored jobs where you sat down and tailored your resume and thought like, okay, this is where I match. I'm just going to apply to these particular roles only.
Yeah, I think just like any job seeker, I have done both of them at different stages. I was looking for a job in 2020, early days of pandemic. And then I went through a job hunt this year as well. So my learning from that is you have limited energies to spend. So if you're already working, there's work, there's life, and you have a very limited amount of time that you can spend on job search. Applying to dozens and dozens of companies and resulted in getting dozens and dozens of rejections because one, I wasn't paying attention to whether this job was, how relevant that job was to what my capabilities are and what I have to offer. I wasn't tailoring my resume that much towards them. There were a lot of places where, screening calls would come in. Do I have time to take all of these or not? So these are the important questions that you need to answer. So ultimately, I applied to something like, I don't have the exact number, but I guess 80 to 100 jobs. And finally, when the time to choose a job come, I had like offers from 2 or 3 different jobs. And when I was being very selective and being very thoughtful about where I'm applying, how I'm applying, so on and so forth, I think I applied to something like 14 or 15 jobs. And by the time my job hunt ended, I had 2 offers. So the end result was pretty much similar, but I had done the process that I had followed, the later one where I was a bit selective. I had the luxury of being a bit selective as well, to be honest. I think I conserved a lot of energy. I did learn a lot of things. I was able to prepare for interviews a bit better. And that really helped me get through the hiring process in a much better shape and form than randomly applying to close to 100 jobs.
I think so too, because I at one point I was so fed up. I was like, how can I apply to 100 jobs, tailor my resume for 100 jobs multiple times, and I'm spending so much time on that, and it's just the quantity, it's not quality, right? And maintaining my 100 resumes, right? Instead, I would maybe find some jobs which I'm maybe passionate about, which I know more about, which I can more, you know, practice interview for, right? And then really stand out using my, you know, resume for that. And sometimes we just create one resume and we are posting that resume to multiple jobs in multiple different companies, same resume. So I think, yes, I would prefer quality over quantity so much. Doesn't matter wherever you are in the world. I would say that even if there is a lot of competition. So
Uh,
and I know we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to switch our mode to more of a hiring manager's perspective. And there is this something called STAR method, and we're going to dive into it and take some examples of how you can turn your experience on your resume and then put it, transform it into something more valuable and interesting. And same goes with your questions and answers during the interviews. So before we begin, I would highly recommend everybody to make sure that you have your resume in front of you at least, or you have an example which you want to transform into much better or recognizable experience. Second question is that before I begin, if anybody has any question, please raise your hand or leave on the chat. And if not, we will move forward. So anyway, any questions so far? Going once, going twice. Okay, so we can move on and probably we'll take the questions at the end. Tips on how to prepare. Okay, yes. So Ali, you would like to say something about transforming your stories into, you know, STAR method.
mhm. So I'll try to answer the question that Ashwarya raised and its relevance to STAR method. Um, Again, they are coming from a personal experience, so it worked for me. It's not guaranteed to work for everyone, but you know, maybe I can share what worked for me, and you can create a version of it which will eventually be more relevant to you and work for you. So I was introduced to STAR method by when I applied to Amazon. I also applied to Facebook. And for interview preparation, they send you a lot of resources. Hey, you're going to interview. It's a bit different, so go through it. And they introduced me to STAR method. That interview preparation guide came that, hey, try to have your responses in the STAR method. So quickly explain what the situation was, what the task was, what action you took, and what the result was. And when I went online and tried to search for it, I saw a lot of opinions about like, hey, you know, um, try to make sure that you explain the situation in 30 seconds and don't spend more than a minute on the task, and the action can take 2 to 3 minutes, but the result should again be 10 to 20 seconds. You know, there are so much guidelines around them. But the most important thing that I really discovered was that in your experience, whether you are a student and you had just 1 year of experience, or you have just done an apprenticeship and now going for a job, or you're a seasoned pro and you've worked for 15 years, there is a lot of things that you have done, and you can simply stories that you can tell. Uh, Take a note of 5 or 6 of those stories that you have, and at least, you know, a few stories, 4 stories, 5 stories would work, and convert them to STAR. Like, have an exercise. Okay, what the situation was, what the task was, what the action you took, what the result was. It. So I created um, an Apple Notes note for it, and I created this whole thing. Okay, situation this, and this is what happened. This is what happened, and I put them on my second screen. It was always there, and whenever I was like going through the motions of applying for jobs and all that, I would have the opportunity to look at them, so that these things are fresh in my mind. And when you're interviewing, there are a lot of questions which come about, tell me a time when XYZ happened, tell me a time when you influence somebody to do something, tell me a time when you were asked to work in something which was very ambiguous and you had to find clarity for yourself. So if you have prepared those 4 or 5 stories, there are many situations you can interlink them to. And star is a good way to explain that story. I don't believe in the going with the formula of explaining what the situation was and task was in a set amount of time and try to make it a bit robotic. But at the end of the day, make sure that you have rehearsed what the story that you're going to tell and what it tells the interviewer about you. And also, the more authentic the story is, the more authentic you come across, because interviewers are smart people and they would cross question you on things. If you're simply making something up, you will get caught ultimately. And some companies use this tool, interviewing tools, where the interviewers is provided with a series of questions that they can do, and they're very thoughtful questions that they have to aligned in a way that if somebody's making things up, they would get exposed in that. So try to remain authentic, truthful, tell your story in a way that other people can understand quickly and relate to it as well.
Yes, I totally agree. I do have something to say about it, but I'm gonna say it at the end. I'm gonna tell a story about it. So moving forward, I know we have been talking and talking the whole time. I think it's important that we also give you an exercise. So we have a lot of audience over here. I would say that take this, before star method experience. This is an experience for a certain company, and this is how it has been listed. And then turn it into some achievements, some star method. So what I would suggest is take 1 minute or maybe 2 minutes, and then come unmute yourself and tell us how you did that. And then I'm gonna basically tell you how I did that, right? So I'm gonna pause the recording right now, and we're gonna take 2 minutes. So when you saw this for the first time, what came to your mind? I mean, from my mind, it's not bad. But I want to know, as a hiring manager, you're going through a resume, and this is what they have written. This is the company, and I worked for this company, and I did this.
Yeah, so this demonstrates to me that you have experience of doing certain things. So for example, conducting surveys or creating things on Canva or devising a market strategy, but it doesn't explain me why you were doing all of this. What was the larger picture and what was your specific contribution to it? And did it work or not? So if we convert it to the star method that we were talking about earlier, so explain me, like, why did you have to create a market strategy for a startup, and why were you specifically targeting Ontario market, for example? During the interview, that is, it's difficult to capture all of that in the resume, but if the interview is there. And secondly, all right, how did you conducted surveys? Was it like online surveys, or was it like a pen and paper surveys and you're meeting people in the town square, or what was the mode of surveys? What was the end result? What did you learn from it? And how did you incorporate that? Okay, based on that, we were like, okay, we are going to create social media campaigns in Canva and see how people react to them on, let's say, Instagram. And based on that, we'll take things forward. All right. And once you have all of these learnings together, you have validated them, then you might take things forward. So that would come to mind right away looking at this slide.
So I think the first thing I did was I was in love with my resume before star method. And trust me, it was not like this either. It was even bad. Like it was, I just use this tools, I just use this and that. But I never talked about the achievement, because I was like, okay, I'm just gonna tell, like, these are my responsibilities. And what you have told me is much more than what I did even after the star method. So bear with me when I reveal that. Before I reveal, I would love to hear our audience thoughts on this, and just try it. it's a good exercise. It's a good practice moment. So anybody who wants to say something?
I think
Okay.
that session is being recorded. People might be able to
Okay.
watch it.
You don't have to, show your face. It's okay. I know, right? A lot of people get very uncomfortable, but trust me, this is the way to build your confidence, and it's also a way to improve your communication. You have that fear of like getting recorded, oh, public speaking, oh. So if you want to be a good product manager, try to be always open, and be there upfront.
So
So
just before we
yeah,
proceed forward,
yes, we're gonna proceed forward, and
one
then
clarification that STAR method is usually referred to in context of how you respond to interview questions,
yeah,
and not how you generally create your resume. But I think what you're telling me is that you've taken that inspiration and change a few things in your resume. That would be
yes.
interesting.
So not everything I would do or say in interview. I did that in my resume because we have very limited space over there.
Mhm.
So what I did is, okay, I said, you know what, it doesn't make sense, and I'll just tell the story, because as human beings we love to read or hear stories, and I just put it that way. And then there were a lot of questions that they wanted to ask, right? I put it somewhere like this as a teaser. And then I was like, okay, maybe if I get recognized and they do see a little bit of achievements, they just have questions like why, what, and how did you do that? So this will be a hook for the interview questions, and that's how we will drive the conversation. And it's always not always about the technical questions, but sometimes the technical questions can come around from here, or even your behavioral questions can come around from here. So let's suppose I was specifically applying for the companies who are looking for innovation or someone with entrepreneurial mindset, right? So they are starting a new line of products, or they have been in the industry for a very long time, and they are having their now what moment. We want to innovate, we have processes and all. And I wanted to reflect that as well. I had so much more on my resume, but I just picked this part. And I thought, like, I had my overview as well. I mentioned that, hey, I had a degree in entrepreneurship, or not only I know concepts, academic concept, but I have been through the startup journey, which means I also have hands-on experience, not only my own startup, but also I have worked in different startups. So that really helped me stand out, basically,
Mhm.
compared to other candidates who might have more experience than me, but they do not, like, they are thinking from traditional processes, or they're going through traditional processes, but they want someone who can think out of the box, bring innovation and all those things. So you need to find where your unfair advantage is, put it there, so you can basically grab their attention. I would say this.
This is amazing. To this day, I create my resume with for good or for bad, in bullet point, like achievements. Maybe I can write 3 achievements for a job. So it's like one bullet point, which might contain a couple of sentences, then the next and next. But converting it into a paragraph or a storytelling way that you have done, that's new for me. It's very interesting. So uh, I would definitely
This actually helped me
experiment
because,
with it at least.
yes,
Yeah, brilliant.
this actually helped me, shorten my length of resume as well, because I was
Really?
saying I have a lot of experience that I want to share, but
Uh-huh.
not everything is relevant. So maybe put the stories over there, and then put some skill set sections where you can put which tools you have used. So I was using some development tools which was not relevant for product management role. So I picked the tools that product managers are aware of, like BI tools or roadmap tools and things like that, only over there. And then I went into stories and what was the problem, this kind of thing, because as product managers, we are doing that. We are gonna do that. So they need to see like what you have to bring different from others. So moving forward to the tiebreaker candidate,
Before you do, I just want to
yeah.
point out that's very educational for me. So thank you for sharing this. I've made some notes and I'll definitely try to follow them.
So no, this was very interesting because before that I did not have product management formal experience, right? I was coming from tech background, and every time I would go, I was rejected by ADS system. I was being rejected so many times that I got frustrated, and I said I want to do something differently. And then if they want to see who is innovative, I'm gonna do something innovative from the scratch, like even before the interview. And so I think these are little things that really makes you stand out. And this is what I not only did I change something about my resume, but I also changed something about my responses. I know I learned about the STAR method, but I'm gonna give you, example. For example, like these questions. I knew that I have to turn my stories into STAR method, but I also have to say something that normally people do not say in professional settings, right? Because interviewers, they are like smart. First of all, they will realize that you are rehearsing or you are, I don't know, googling or whatever you are doing, but also they can be very tired and busy. So you have to say something. They're interviewing so many people at the same time, so you have to say something that they will remember after the interview, right? So for example, tell me about yourself. I know I'm not going to ask you all to just come on board if you don't feel okay, but it would have been great if you could have prepared your tell me about yourself. So previously I was going blah 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 the traditional way. I have this master's and I have this bachelor's, and I worked in this company, this and that. But what I changed afterwards is, I don't know, Ali, it's going to be funny. I asked, when they asked me a question, I asked, hey, have you ever used home security? Have you ever been arrested or something like that? They
Great.
asked me this question. Nobody will answer like this. Who does that? So I said, no, no. And I said, I was almost getting arrested the Hollywood style. Now let me tell you how this actually made me to apply to your company. And this was the way to grab the attention, right? It's not about, okay, they are just warming up and listening to you. And I told them, like, hey, I'm gonna give the example. Hey, you know what? I used the home security for the first time. I did not know that if I set the alarm and if I don't know the key, it's gonna run off, and this and that. And I was actually living in someone else's house. I was house sitting. and and this was a crazy moment, right? And I thought that they have same password from outdoor like gate versus their alarm, and they said that you should not set the alarm, and I misheard. I thought they said set the alarm
Uh, uh,
until we come back, and we have to open the door. My child was there. She was crying, let me go. I felt like a hostage situation, and I was just waiting, okay, someone, and they did come. The securities did come in, and I thought, I am so new, brand new, right, in the country. And I don't have anything to prove this is my house. But this was the story I told in Tell Me About Yourself, right? And I said that, yes, I did that. And then I came to know about your company because we were the customers of what you are building, right? And I started as a joke that I have to work for this company to really tell the product managers you did the right job, and I want to be product manager and that. So this is how it became
that's
interesting.
very interesting. Yeah, amazing, amazing. In your previous slide, I think the question that you raised was the tiebreaker candidate. And when I was reading through it, there's something that came to my mind. I was like, okay, great, I can probably share that. Um, but um, uh, do you? Sorry, before I venture into it, do you think that that initial story about breaking the security system and almost getting arrested and all that, do you think that uh, got you the initial attention that you wanted? But was it something that helped you throughout the interview later on?
I think you can see the face expression. It really matters. Interviewers' face expression, you never know where the interviewer is coming from, what's going on in their head. You need to set a stage. That's what basically I did. Okay, live stage. This is going to be, interviews don't need to be stressful. It can be fun, right? So I started with this, and then it's not the first question they asked, or it's not the only question they asked, and I responded like that. I responded with every question they were asking. For example, they asked me a question like, okay, how do you rate yourself as a product manager on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, here's a tricky part, right? You are an experienced product manager, so you rate yourself. I was not, right? And I didn't want to rate myself poorly because I'm also don't want to tell them like I'm a poor, I don't believe in that, right? So I said I can never be 10. If you ever ask me, I can never be 10. So then again, they were like, hey, what? I never, thought that somebody would say this. I want to know why. So that's how the conversation is driving. And I said, like, the moment a product management is all about keep learning and keep up to date with the market. And the moment product managers think that I know everything, that's it. They're done. They're done. So if he or she is 10, that means they're done with the learning. So that means they are not highly motivated for this role and they need something else. They need to be they're out there for some other challenging role. This role is, so I'm going to keep myself, I rated above 5 or 6, above 5 at least, because I want to have the motivation to reach towards 10. So usually you wouldn't answer like that for rate yourself from 1 to 10. You're like, okay, maybe I'm 7, maybe I'm 8, or I'm 10. I'm so impressed with myself. So I think answer differently. So they will remember, okay, this was the kind of person, especially for a product manager, who had this kind of communication on the spot. And this is not the traditional way of answering these questions. So that's what
Provided a kind of like a shock value to the interviewing process, and then linked up your motivations and how would you take the conversation road. Did you really, like, was it on the fly, or did you put some thought to it before interview?
I think, honestly speaking, not everything was thought before the interview. I love working under pressure, all the time. I think if people who have worked with me, they would panic around me. Okay, time is running out. Time is running out. We're not done with something. But that's what makes me much more creative, because I have to push myself to think out of the box. If a person is lazy, they're always innovative and they'll find an innovative way to make things much more convenient. That's just an example, right? So I thought that if they're asking me a question, do not just jump right away the next second to answer. Take a moment, take a deep breath. Yes, you have to prepare stories. Something that happened in the past, you have to prepare stories, but you need to know the way they have asked the question. Can I mold my stories into that question? So when they ask me 1 to 10, I know, like, I'm kind of trapped, right? I felt trapped at the time because this is the first time I'm getting into that. And I said, like, I have no way to answer this in a best way except that. And I told them, like, because I did not know the answer. Actually did not know the answer where I am, 5, 6, 10, whatever. And I said that. When I said that, I grabbed the attention. They asked me why. This gave me some few seconds to think about it. So I think you can do that if people will do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's a very interesting perspective. Thank you so much. And I started sharing a story before we ventured
Yes.
into that part. That was how to be a tiebreaker candidate. There's an interesting story that I think I can share where I wasn't the tiebreaker candidate and I learned why. And that was really an eye opener for me. So I applied for Spotify. I was like, okay, premium music app in the world, and you know, I learned so much about their how they structured their teams into tribes and squads and so on and so forth. They were very innovative with that, and um, if you go to employee feedback, it's one of the best companies to work for. So that attracted me towards them. They're in Stockholm, in Sweden. I was in Tokyo, and I was like, let's apply for it and see where it takes me. So went to the got shortlisted, went through their entire hiring process, and at the end, I got rejected. But the amazing thing about Spotify is that they're very transparent with their hiring process. And I asked my contact in HR, like, can I get some feedback, like why I wasn't hired? And she was like, oh yeah, yeah, sure. I wasn't expecting that, but she shared her screen and all the interviews, the feedback they had provided. She took me through them, and I was rejected in the cultural interview, and I was like, what? And the note from the interviewer was that he does not quotes a lot of female role models in the leadership, although he has worked with some. So whenever it's like people you've worked for, what you've learned, what you've not learned, and I realized that I was probably doing that. So I worked with, for example, I worked with Carol, who was the head of products for the branch of Rakuten that I was working for. She was an MIT grad. She was pretty much a great professional, product management professional. I learned a lot from her. I didn't mention quite a bit about her during my journey. And lack of female role models and was something that was not there. And then I went back and I read up on the interview preparation material that I was sent. And when I read about culture, they were very, very adamant about the company culture that we are building, the equity and the DEI initiatives at Spotify. They're very clear to it. And I missed out that opportunity based on that. So so that was, I think, something very interesting that I should share here in this context, where
No,
I wasn't the tiebreaker
thank
candidate.
you so much. Thank you so much. We are a bit over time, but we started a bit late today. So I had a question, how to use your part-time jobs to how to use part-time jobs to our leverage, even if they do not relate to the job description. So that would be, if you want to clarify more, is it the part-time job that is building a skills and is not exactly the same industry? Did you mean that? The skills that would be valuable for your job, for your new job? So I think how I would answer this question, and Ali, I also want your opinion as well, is that when you're doing part-time jobs, I think you should know that what I am doing next, right? For example, when they are not related to the same industry. Okay. So if you're working, for example, for product management, or it doesn't even say product management, but let's suppose you're doing certain things a product manager does, right? Or a project manager does, right? It doesn't matter, because for me, I have never worked in an industry that I am working currently. Never. I know nothing about it. But because they want to know if they throw in some responsibilities or some problem to you, how do you tackle it? It's not all you can learn about the industry, while working for that particular industry. So I think you need to extract the experience that you accumulated in the previous part-time job. Then again, we talked about your achievement. What was your achievement? Maybe you can throw in some small amount of timing, like within short amount of time I did that, or that would reflect your time management if your other role requires that. So I think that's how you can actually use this. I don't know if I answered your question, but Ali, you want to say something?
It's a hard question to answer, especially in abstract terms, like, hey, you know what, you can do this and that. There would be many variables here. Like, for example, why was you doing a part-time job? So, for example, uh, are you a parent who was opting to go part-time to have a better work-life balance and all that? That demonstrates that you value the work-life balance much more than this. If was it some other situation where it might demonstrate your resilience about it. In my experience, my first job was a software sales job. It wasn't and that was during my college. So, and why I was doing it, because I had to pay the bills and take things forward. But I started listening into my resume, especially in the initial years, because it showed that I had that experience of talking to clients, talking to customers. And then I could also demonstrate that, all right, I was able to generate 2 leads, which resulted in creating custom features for the clients, and then the software sale was done to them. So that I could link that with my job, even though I was interviewing for an engineering job down the line. So it's difficult to say, but I think there are certain things you can demonstrate out of them if you want to mention it. Resilience, your pursuit of work and life balance, or as you mentioned, some of the other traits that you can trait. Or you could choose not to talk about them or not to demonstrate them if you think it's really not relevant. It's all up to you.
I think this is what I wanted to say to everybody. I think it's extremely important once you get into the interview process, they have to know your personality as well. Sometimes it's also about who will best fit in our team culture, work culture, and team, and how resilient you are, like you mentioned, Ali. But from the industry perspective, I would say, if let's take an example, Ali, right? If somebody is coming from a is a project manager, for example, right? They are working in a construction company versus they want to get into tech space, right? They have not been, or even if you take an example of product manager, but working in a different company, not as in company, but the industry itself, the entire industry, tech versus non-tech. Now they want to get into that space. How can they do that? One thing that I want to add in is, if you have taken, before this transition, if you have taken formal education, right? For example, you did masters or you took certification, I would say definitely use that. Like, you worked in this industry, this sparked joy in you, or this said that, hey, I was working in a completely different industry, but then I came to know about this particular industry and I said I wanted to get into that space. You mentioned why you want to get into that space, and then you did what steps you took to get into that space. That's how I think, like I mentioned, I turned it into stories, because those were irrelevant. What I did in the previous industry, I was mentioning a task, I was getting rejected because that was completely irrelevant to the jobs that I was applying. So I turned it into a story. You can also do the same thing by putting that company and put that company name under the company name, turn it into a story, do something differently about your resume, and make sure to use the keywords that they are looking for in a job description, because that's what ATS will be looking for.
Makes sense. I have a question, if I can ask.
Yes.
That's the question around personality. So I was raised speaking a different language. I come from a culture where it's more about us than you yourself individually. So it's more about team than an individual. Where stating something in your individual achievements is considered a bit, oh, this person is bragging about himself and so on and so forth. Whereas the expectation of interviewers these days, especially if we talk about North America, Europe, is that you would be able to demonstrate what you did achieve individually, so on and so forth. Extrovert personality types are generally well liked. That's the conventional wisdom. So it's very easy for me to, not demonstrate a lot about my personality, but rather find comfort in the details of the tasks that I did and the outcomes, the results, and things like that. So if you are coming in from a very different culture, and you're applying for a job which is a different industry, different culture, so on and so forth, how do you demonstrate um, the positive aspects of your personality during the interview, or how do you slate with your personality if you don't know what's relevant in your armor, what's relevant in your personality to this interview?
So that's a question for me.
Yes, that's a question for you.
Okay, that's a very difficult question, but I will try to answer definitely. So I think it's going to be 100% irrelevant to what you are asking, but it does make difference.
Okay.
It's completely irrelevant to the professional, tips I would give. First of all, a happy candidate, a happy, fully charged candidate, because if you are coming like this, yes, like you're answering, and they're gonna get bored, even though they know it's professional, they're not gonna judge you on that basis. But what if someone else they interviewed the same day have a much better energy? The other person will stand out, right? They will think about, okay, I want that kind of person in my team. And if they become somebody who can even answer the questions, like all the technical questions, right, then I'm going to choose that person, right? That's the best candidate. And then these are the kind of personality you don't really have to tell people, I did this, I did that, right? Your responses can make difference sometimes, the way you handle your sometimes friendly nature, because they don't want conflicts, or somebody who knows how to deal with the conflicts. We're actually over time, 13 minutes. I just want to be mindful of time. So thank you so very much, Ali, and for coming, and all the other people who actually joined us today. I would say if you are interested in speaking, please inquire. We have more sessions coming in. So if you have registered to Need Spot, you don't have to register again, because I'm going to be sending in free invitations to you all. And secondly, last but not the least, once again, thank you so much, Ali. It was very, very informative for me as well. Sitting with you and having this formal discussion on, interviews, and knowing your thoughts on that. So we're gonna wrap up over here. If somebody has any other questions before we wrap up, please let me know, and I'm gonna ask.
So while we wait for questions, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much to all the attendees. I try to use any conversation that I have as educational opportunity for me and to improve myself. And I think there were quite a lot of things that came up, which I learned myself. And to everyone attending, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's have this conversation. If there's anything I can help you out with, great. I think it'll be great to have different perspectives around things, and that's always helps you, take yourself.
One question.
Please.
So as a hiring manager, will you hire me now?
As a hiring manager, if it comes to choosing between two different candidates, you would certainly be a tiebreaker candidate based on the customizations that you have done to your responses in that, because I think it shows that you are more engaged, you are willing to go the extra mile, you're very engaged, you're motivated, you have a backstory to tell me why you are applying to this job. So I think that would help you be the tiebreaker candidate on this.
Thank you so much, Ali, for your thoughts. Thank you, everyone. See you later for next session. Bye.